Chapter 722 Walking with the Oracle. She's perfect. Now that he was in her presence once again, Ray became reminded of how he felt the first time he laid eyes on the epitome of beauty. The Oracle's every frame was perfection itself, from her perfectly beautiful face, to her shimmering blue eyes, and the dress she wore, which was adorned with gold and all other forms of jewels. Her hair was whiter than all else, and the fact that her body was bathed with the brilliant golden rays of the sanctuary around her only increased her appeal. Her very posture was full of elegance, and the way she stoically gazed upon Ray made her appear all the more majestic. "So, you've returned." She broke the silence, her eyes trailing to the elf that Ray tightly had close to his chest. It was only when she said this that Ray ceased his light gawking and cleared his throat in a slightly unnatural fashion. He felt like an idiot for staring that long, but there was just something about the Oracle that made it almost impossible not to be engrossed in her. "Yes, so. I brought your vessel." He raised Ciela high, showing the elf in all her glory to the epitome of perfection before him. "I can see that. Now, hand her over." As the Oracle stretched out her hand to receive Ciela's unconscious body, Ray pulled it away and made a slight glare at the Oracle. First. I've done so much already for this deal, so it's only right that I get her first, right?" He knew the Oracle was much stronger than he was, but he also remembered their last battle quite vividly. "As long as I maintain control over the space around me, it won't be easy for her to grab Ciela from me. And, at this point, there's no need for her to refuse the deal since I'm in her domain with the prize." Just as Ray expected, the Oracle gave in. "Fair enough," she said, moving away from Ray as her lips parted a second time. "Follow me." Without wasting any time, Ray thrust his body forward and trailed behind the flowing hair that danced behind the Oracle. They traversed the Golden Palace until they reached a door, which the Oracle opened. Its content was pure white, and she stepped inside, allowing Ray to follow suit before the doors closed behind them both. Upon entry, Ray was greeted with an entirely surprising sight. The white point led them to what appeared to be a dense forest, filled with so many plants, shrubberies, and endless trees that seemed to stretch on forever. The door they came through had long vanished, and only the forest seemed to exist. As Ray was silently wrapping his thoughts around what happened, the Oracle ceased walking and turned to face him. "Don't waste time." As she said this, her eyes glowed blue and she slightly creased her brows in a glare. "I was just observing my surroundings." "That isn't a waste of time," he responded rather swiftly, refusing to be bullied by her. Inasmuch as she was stronger than him, he couldn't dismiss the fact that he had certainly worked hard to qualify for this meeting. It wasn't like he was asking for some kind of favor this time. This was something he earned. Besides, it's ironic that, for someone so particular about time, you delayed me for so long before responding to my appearance in the shrine. He had spent at least 30 minutes there, and yet, she only responded when he was growing justifiably paranoid. Something told him the Oracle did this intentionally, but her constantly passive and detached attitude told him she wasn't the petty type. So what was it? Why did she take so long? Synchronizing this realm with H-Tray takes time. It's why I took a while before bringing you here and sending you back the last time. The Oracle said with a calm, impersonal tone. Once again, she didn't seem to care, but that wasn't what struck Ray. So she was taking it easy on me last time? Or rather, she didn't take too much action until she could send me back to the normal world, huh? It somehow felt like bullshit, but since Ray had no other answer to his question, and he saw no reason why the Oracle would lie to him about such an inconsequential detail, he accepted it. Once they walked a little more, the atmosphere suddenly changed. The dense forest vanished, replaced by the dry and hot climate of the desert. Grains of sand sucked to Ray as he moved, forcing him to kick them with every step he took. He was tempted to fly, but after seeing the oracle walking, he decided to just continue. It's not like I'm growing tired or anything. The sand was just really uncomfortable, but since the fair maiden could endure it, so could he. Not long after, the desert became an icy realm surrounded by tall snow-capped mountains, with lands littered with snow. The change was so swift that Ray didn't even notice it until it happened. Is this some sort of amalgamation of different spaces? Or do spaces of various kinds overlap here? It was difficult to tell, even with his senses and spatial control. Perhaps that was because the oracle had more dominant authority over the space than him. Ray planned to remain silent and simply observe, but after doing this for a while, his curiosity got the better of him, so he blurted out the pressing question on his mind. How long till we get to Asm? She didn't answer him, and kept walking instead. TCH. Not liking the fact that he was ignored, Ray stopped moving, and not long after, the oracle stopped as well. She didn't turn to look at him this time, but she did so anyway. Suddenly, the atmosphere became a thunderstorm with heavy rain descending from the darkened heavens, and swirling winds dancing all over the area. The immense darkness was illuminated by the oracle's presence, and despite the heavy rain that fell, she did nothing to stop herself from getting drenched. Instead, she uttered words that stopped Ray from uttering anything in protest. You already know the truth about the dragons, don't you? About their identity as otherworlders, and their role in this world. Ray's facade was that of stoicism, at least, that was what he hoped. He also ensured to keep it that way as he gave his response. What of it? You must have an idea of how this world operates, then. It is a story. With a start, a middle, and an end. All of it determined. Ray didn't know why the oracle was telling him this, especially when his question was about Esm, but he wasn't going to waste such an opportunity, especially when she was being so talkative. Determined by who? You, right? No. Her flat answer caught Ray off guard, but he only followed up the response with another question. So who is the? I do not know. I only know a little more than you do about all of this. And the purpose of this world. She responded before he could even finish his words. Then, as she turned to look at him, the dropping rain that cascaded down her face made it appear as though she was crying heavy tears. Just as you had no say in becoming a piece. I had no say in being a player. Chapter 723, Walking with the Oracle. There is no such thing as a real choice. For everything one does has been somewhat predetermined by biological inclinations and societal orientation. People are predisposed to acting in certain ways due to their upbringing, as well as innate traits inherited through the gene. These factors make the free will they possess as mere illusions. One does not choose to eat. They are either hungry, satisfying a craving, or following a directive stemming from certain external conditions that is further amplified by an internal response. This is the position of certain philosophies. I am not the one who started all of this. The oracle began as she looked at Ray with an emotionless face. Yet, her eyes. Something about it felt tragic. I am neither the owner of the game, nor the one who designed the board. I am nothing more than a player forced to sit on one end of the board and play with the pieces that I am bestowed upon. Bestowed upon by who? I do not know, but you have met one of them, have you not? The messenger of the ones above. As the oracle said this, Ray remembered the accident that brought himself and all his classmates before the pearly gates. Back then, they were greeted by a rather magnificent entity. Seraph. So that is their name. The oracle smiled softly. It appears you knew something I didn't. Ray returned her smile and responded. Not anymore. Hoo-hoo. Indeed. At that point, the rain ceased and it became a rather sunny atmosphere. The sudden warmth cleared the remnant cold, though the drenched figure of the oracle remained unchanged as Ray stared at her. She wasn't walking, which meant she had more to tell him. I know this is asking for a lot, but do not resent me and the elves. Continue to look after them, even after the conclusion of our deal. Ray smirked as soon as he heard that. And what's in it for me? She shrugged almost instantly. Nothing. Consider it something of a last favor. A dying wish of sorts. You're going to die. Not necessarily. Just as with my predecessors, my consciousness and knowledge will be merged with the new vessel and become the new oracle. However, I am not certain if I will remain me once this is over. I doubt I was this way before I became the oracle, and I also doubt I will continue to remain this way in the new vessel. Ray understood what she was saying, and it honestly felt scary. I guess she was also making tough choices for the sake of the world, rather than selfishly choosing to preserve her own life. She wants to benefit the larger whole. The prime reason she couldn't make more egregious moves was because the enemy would do the same, which was why agency was left to the pieces on the board. In a sense, she was a victim of this entire scenario, and while Ray found it very hard to fully absolve her of all the negative emotions he had towards her, he could empathize with her. Logically speaking, she has done nothing wrong. All the grievances he had were merely emotional, subject to his arbitrary definition of right and wrong. Something he felt rather hesitant to rely so strongly on now. The truth is, I love this world. Ray confessed, following the same spirit that prompted the oracle to speak up in the first place. Oh, really? While I know that isn't the case, it almost feels like this entire world was made just for me. I got an amazing skill, was able to experience a lot of amazing things. And even though I've been in a lot of messed up situations, I'm still alive somehow. Yes, perhaps all of this was mostly luck. Maybe he just happened to be the one to win the lottery, hence becoming special as a result. It could have been anyone, so having such power fall on him was still perfectly normal. That was what he told himself. I know it's conceited for me to think this way, but I somehow feel responsible for this world, or rather, the people within it. Ray didn't know the exact moment when his goal evolved from just getting stronger to a much larger ambition, but he knew that within himself now. I want this war to end. I want to protect humanity, to defeat the dragons, and to create a peaceful world for all to live in. Perhaps this was all just a selfish way of saying he wanted a happily ever after for himself, but this was much larger than him at this point. It was probably naive and childish of him, but he truly wanted to help. And, even though I had the chance to be complicit in the destruction of the elves, and I also despise them for a lot of the things they have done, I still want to protect them. In his eyes, they were like misguided children who had committed several atrocities. He could perhaps put some blame on them, but it would be unfair to shove all of the responsibility to them, just as it would be unfair to do the same to the oracle. In the end, whoever is behind this is to blame. So, Ray made a vow to himself at least, regarding the matter with the elves. I will show them the right path. He had all the power and recognition to do so, so rather than just utilizing the elves for his benefit, he would also give back to them. Thank you, Ray. She smiled at him. though, I do not think your intentions translate to what would be best for the elves. What do you mean? He furrowed his brows at this point. The current problematic views of the elves, as well their no-killing policy is necessary for their preservation by nature. Preservation? What do you? Listen carefully, Ray. In the future, only the elves will survive the great conflict to come, and they will thrive in the new age. As the oracle said this, Ray looked at her with horror. Her expression showed no malice or pleasure, just an emotionless facade. I told you already, didn't I? In the end, you will fail. Chapter 724 Walking with the Oracle. This world, Ray, is meant to be inherited by the elves. Ray already knew that the world had a certain bias towards the elves. Despite their nonviolent culture, they were still incredibly powerful. They also had such hubris that was backed up by the world's preference towards them. He was constantly told to help them, and it was only when he was on their side that his alignment became a good variant. Does that mean good and evil are decided by one's tendency to aid the elves and not harm them? Are things really that simple here? He didn't know anymore. From what the oracle just told him, everything else was pointless. Everyone else will perish. He asked, just for confirmation, and he watched as the oracle affirmed his words. Everyone else will perish. Ray was supposed to believe her. After all, she had been correct about the path that opened up which allowed him to save Ciela. She was also correct about plenty of other things, and she even seemed sincere and impersonal about the whole thing. He knew she certainly wasn't lying. But, even then, I can't believe it. I don't think the future is as set in stone as you believe it to be. Ray mumbled to himself. Are you saying I saw wrong? No. He stared hard at her as he gave the only response he could. It's simply that I intend to change that future you saw. Ray believed in his own free will, as well as the power of decisions. If a person knew the future and did his best to change it, one of two things could happen. He could inevitably arrive at that future. Or he could completely change it. For example, if a person knew he would die in a car accident, then he could simply stay at home all day and call sick at work. By doing so, he would have changed that future. Though it was possible that a car crashed into his home and killed him, despite his attempts to prevent the accident in its entirety. Either way, Ray didn't think the man's death in the latter case amounted to the same future as with the first scenario if he just entered his car and died in the car accident. The future had changed somehow, and his death happened in a different fashion. If I know enough, and I take the proper actions, I'm sure I will be able to change the future enough to save as many people as possible. A lot of people were probably still going to die, but if he could preserve the majority, saving as many as he possibly could, that would be more than enough as an accomplishment for him. No, not just him. It would be the best outcome for Ray. And do you think those who designed this game will let you alter that future that has been preset? One of the benefits of playing a game is that one doesn't know the final outcome. They do not know if they will win or lose. But this one is different. It's less like a game and more like a story. The ones above already have an end in mind, and your defiance will alter it. Do you truly believe they will stay still and let you interfere? After being silent for so long, Ray smiled as he confidently placed his hand on his chest and responded with as much boldness as he could muster. I don't care for them. Cowards who arbitrarily set up the worst possible outcome for a story and leave us to live out their mess. I can't be bothered with them. Was he scared of those high up? The ones who had even more authority than the oracle? Yes. Yes, they frightened him. But weren't they functionally non-existent in this world? They contributed nothing to H-Tray, and all they did was set up the world, dooming most of its residents to destruction. If they haven't interfered thus far, I don't expect them to do anything of note. And even if they do, I'll think of something once I get to that point. If he and everyone else in this world were fated to die, the very least he could do was try his best to help as many people survive. And if the ones above had a problem with it and finally descended from their high place, then things couldn't possibly be worse than total annihilation. That was his current position. Perhaps this was all blind stubbornness, the kind expected from an immature teenager who had very limited experience of the world. But Ray truly clung to his words, refusing to let them go no matter what. The Oracle saw that as she listened to him speak, and it made her chuckle, no, even laugh very loudly. You could be correct. After all, you are the singularity that even I do not understand. Her laughter still echoed as she uttered those words and smiled very longingly at him. I hope to witness this future that you will create from the depths of my successor's consciousness. You could also help, you know. Tell me everything about the future, no, maybe just the important bits so that I can do my best. The Oracle shook her head slowly and sadly as she heard this. Rather unfortunately, I cannot. My memory has reached its utmost limit, and other than what happens at the very end, I have no knowledge of whatever happens after now. What? Damn it. I would have also liked to bless you with my skill, but your limited memory and weak body will not be able to properly utilize it in any meaningful way. Isn't it SSS tier? That does not matter in the face of your. You can see the future with, can't you? In that case, even if it is seconds, or minutes, or hours into the future, I am sure it will help me out in some way. Please. Give me the skill. The Oracle smiled and nodded at Ray upon hearing his resolute request. Very well, Ray. Consider this my contribution for the future you wish to create. Chapter 725 World of White. The walk of silence continued between the two. After their interaction subsided, neither Ray or the Oracle spoke another word to each other. Instead, the latter kept her eyes forward, and the latter followed her every movement. The landscape around them kept changing too. Ray didn't ask any further questions, not allowing his impatience to get the better of him this time. He knew better than to say anything problematic. This continued until, once again, the Oracle stopped. We're here. Ray set his gaze beyond the Oracle, staring into the space that she had her eyes on. That was when he saw it, a door in the middle of nowhere. It was currently a desert landscape, so dry sand kept swirling around the door, its grains beating upon it as they danced in the air. She is beyond that door. The Oracle pointed, gesturing that Ray proceeded into the place. Normally, Ray would have been very conflicted and skeptical of the whole thing. He would be rather suspicious of the Oracle, wanting her to venture in first something like that. He would have considered a chance that the door was a trap too. All of that was stifled now. It wasn't that he trusted the Oracle completely, but that he simply saw no reason to be on guard before her. There was no need for her to resort to such an elaborate trap, even if she had malicious intent. And Ray didn't think she had any malicious intent. So Esma's behind that door, huh? Stepping forward while breathing heavily, Ray kept his gaze fixated on the lone door. There didn't seem to be anything behind it, but that didn't stop him from reaching for the doorknob and twisting it the moment he got close enough. Pshua! A hissing sound proceeded from within the door as soon as he merely opened it. Go on, the Oracle's voice prompted him, and he could feel her gaze on his back. Not wanting to cause any further delay, he took a deep breath and stepped into the world of the unknown that he would be thrust into. Then. This is. Ray's eyes widened as he was greeted with yet another vast world. This was a land of winter, with a lot of mountains in the distance, and dried trees decorating the surrounding from various sides. In this world of white, there was silence, a form of purity. The decorum was deafening, and it felt sacred to the utmost. No living entity seemed to be present. Except one. "What are you doing here, Ray?" Ray's heart nearly skipped a beat as soon as he heard the voice. He hadn't been too distracted not to notice that she was standing right behind him. He just didn't know what to say when he faced her, so he remained like that until she spoke. Even though his back was turned against her, he could see her pretty normally thanks to his all-round vision. She was gorgeous as usual. No. Even better. Something about these white lands seemed to accentuate her beauty, giving her the vibe of an untouched flower, delicate and precious. Ray didn't know where to start from, or what to say. A million thoughts ran in his head, and he could only pick one. The choice became so difficult that he decided not to think at all and simply follow his instincts. "I missed you." Turning to face her, he allowed the fiercely cold wind to blow against his dark hair, revealing his eye-patched eye on one side, and the crimson one on the other. He also saw her wearing a pure gown, almost like a wedding dress, staring at him stoically. Despite his best attempts to hide his emotions, they bled out too raw. In contrast to him, though, Esme didn't seem to have any struggles at all. She was completely calm. "I'm guessing the Oracle informed me of your arrival." "She didn't." Ray was stunned. If the Oracle didn't tell Esme that he was coming, how could she maintain such a calm facade even when they were face to face with each other? Could it be? "I know what you're thinking, Ray, but the Oracle didn't do anything to me. She has hardly interacted with me since I got here." Oh. Ray used his just to confirm, and Esme wasn't lying. She was perfectly normal, at least according to the system. "I see." "Yeah." After this, they both stared awkwardly at each other, the distance between them about 10 meters or so. Either of them could close it in a second, but they both remained transfixed in their positions. Until. "Can we talk? I'm sorry for not hearing you out last time." Ray finally spoke up, breaking into a sigh. "It's fine." "No, it's not." He quickly interrupted her. "I should have considered you greatly, focusing on what you wanted and why. If I did that, I would have been able to properly convince you not to do this." "You wouldn't have been able to convince me, Ray. This is something I want to do." She shook her head stubbornly. Ray could feel a burning emotion within him as soon as he saw this. "So, you were so comfortable just leaving?" "I still don't understand. As much as I apologize for not giving a conversation between us a chance, you also share in the blame for that." You. "So do you despise M?" "No." Ray took a step forward, but quickly stopped upon realizing how forceful he was probably being. His main purpose for all of this was not just to get Esme to come back with him, but for the both of them to have a conversation and understand each other. That wouldn't happen if he chose to be brutish. "Ray. Can I tell you something?" Esme's face seemed downcast at this point, depicting the very first emotion he had observed from her since their reunion. The atmosphere suddenly grew tense, but Ray Reddy responded anyway. Yes. Yes, of course." In a flash, she appeared right in front of Ray, her eyes fixated on his as she parted her lips and uttered the words. "I love you. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading." Well, this was rather unexpected. We've finally gotten to that moment, haven't we? Wonder what happens next. Chapter 726 Confessions. Ray stared dumbfoundedly at Esme the moment he heard those words. Why you? Before he could say anything more, she held him on both cheeks and pushed herself upward while pulling him towards her. He was still recoiling from the confession when he felt her lips touch his. Before he realized what was happening, he was in a passionate kiss with Esme, the both of them reciprocating the action. Ray couldn't believe this was him. No. It was more like he didn't want to believe that this was him. He had so much pent-up passion that was released during the kiss, and the deeper he went into it, the more comfortable he became. His stiff hands began to move, and they reached for Esme's body, going for an embrace. But no, Ray. Before he could fully capture her in his arms, Esme pulled away, leaving him stuck in place. I know you're in love with Alicia. I don't want to get in the way of that. That seemed strange, coming from someone who had just kissed him, but Ray said nothing about that. He just had a bewildered expression on his face as he stared at her. Rather than make you choose, or complicate matters, I have chosen this path. This way, I will carry the burden of my emotions myself, while also walking down a path of greater purpose. Ray instinctively knew that if he didn't say anything, it would all be over. He already understood that. And so, parting his moist lips for the first time since the kiss, he finally blurted out the words that his mind could form as fast as possible. I don't want to lose you. Esme gave him a slight smile, shrugging at those words. Ray. It's not that simple. I know it isn't. I know, but can you just allow me to be selfish? Please. He didn't know what else to tell her. He didn't know what to say about his love for Alicia, or her love for him, or the way he felt right now just looking at her. He didn't want to lie to her, but he also didn't want to be honest with her as well. About his feelings that ran rabid within him. He simply suppressed them and told her what he could. But none of it was enough. Esme shook her head once she was done hearing his pleas and smiled. My decision has already been made, Ray. I will become the next Oracle. She gave her resolute response with a determined expression. He could see it in her eyes, she was completely serious. I'm sorry. Sadness followed her eyes as she looked away from him, allowing the cold wind to blow around them and quell the silence with its cold howl. This was only temporary, though, as Ray also gave his reply. I'm sorry as well. If he had known things would turn out this way, he would have taken a different path. After all, he wanted Esme to be happy, and if this was what made her experience fulfillment, then he wouldn't have come in the way of that. No, who am I kidding? I would have still done so. Becoming the Oracle meant merging one's consciousness with so many others. Esme would no longer be herself once the process was complete, which made her functionally dead. How could he ever allow that under any circumstances? I wish there was some sort of compromise I could make, or some way to make you change your mind. Unfortunately, there isn't. And it was already too late for any of that. Whoosh. That very instant, someone interrupted the rather tense silence that enveloped the two. She floated in the sky, forcing the two to gaze upon her in all her glory. The instant they saw the Oracle, they recognized her. I have come here to inform you that the deal has been cancelled, she said in a fairly cold and detached manner. To call Esme shocked would be an understatement. She was stupefied by the Oracle's decision, and so kept alternating glances between Ray and the Oracle. It appeared as though she wanted to say a million things at once, but was stuck on delivery. You are a sweet and kind girl, Esm. You also carry a lot of strength and virtue within you. All of which will be lost once you become the oracle. What? I do not wish for you to carry such a burden. I want to, No, Esm. Trust me when I say that you don't want to. The oracle's voice was reminiscent of sadness as she spoke. If she, as the oracle, was so certain about the overwhelming loss that would be bestowed upon her successor, surely it would be able to convince Esm of the wrongness of her choice. But no. The girl stubbornly clung to the idea, once again trying to enforce the deal they made. However, no matter how hard Esm pushed, the oracle shook her head. There was no way she was budging from her position, partly because she already had a replacement, but also because of what she saw within Esm. It was something she didn't want to taint. Esm. Despite your identity as a half-elf, I recognize you as one of us. One of me. I won't be turning you into a full elf, but you are not lesser than they are. At this point, the oracle descended to Esm and embraced her. Their foreheads touched each other in a light tap, causing a beam to explode from the contact made. Coupled with the light was a surge of energy. Boom! As the violent winds whipped across the area, and Ray stood there witnessing all that was happening, the silence among the three seemed to last an eternity. Farewell, Esm. The oracle's sweet voice echoed softly into the air, melodiously ringing in the atmosphere around them. Esm's eyelids fell short, and she lost all the strength in her body at that moment. I hope you find happiness. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Looks like Esm lost her chance to be an op god. I wonder what happens now. Chapter 727, The Oracle's Last Words. Was this the best choice? Ray now had Esm in his arms, and the oracle was now holding the unconscious Ciela. After she fell unconscious, Ray had used his spatial abilities to bring her to him, and afterwards gave the oracle the vessel she required. With their deal sealed, there was practically nothing left of their exchange. It was time for Ray to return home, and for the oracle to start her business. But I feel like I just did a horrible act, depriving her of her wish. Ray's guilt was eating him up, and he turned to the oracle to hear her opinion on it. Indeed. Ciela should be more compatible with me anyway, so having her as the vessel is a lot more beneficial too. Not that, idiot. I mean. Ahem. Sorry about that. It's fine. It takes one to know one. Where did that come from? Ray was more than surprised to see the usually emotionless and detached oracle throw a jab at him in such a way. It even made him smile a little. The moment he smiled, he realized that this had to have been the oracle's plan all along. This was her way of cheering him up. Thanks, Oracle. You're welcome, Ray. The two of them exited the space where Esm was in through another door that suddenly appeared before them, and once they did so, they returned to the oracle's golden palace. Does that mean she could have brought us to Esm directly? Then why didn't she? Ray wanted to ask, but quickly decided against it. The reason she chose such an elaborate method was probably to have a discussion with him, and based on how productive it was, he didn't regret a second of it. The only problem on his mind was Esm. And one other issue. What about Alicia? Is she? She has been healed already. The oracle's response was swift, almost as if she could read his thoughts. Upon hearing this, he smiled and nodded. I can heal her curse with, but that would mean reverting her stats and skills that have evolved due to summoning Dagon. That won't be good in the long run, so this arrangement is far better. Other than relief, however, Ray didn't feel much about the news. Perhaps he thought it was already a given, or because he already had some way to save her, so he didn't feel as excited as he thought he would be. Either way, that ate away at him too. I should be leaving now, Ray muttered, almost in a defeated tone. Thank you for everything. It's nothing. As the oracle said this, Ray began to feel the spatial pressure around him loosen. The difference between how he was willingly leaving the domain this time, and how he was forced to the last time played in his mind, causing him to smile wryly. So much had changed in such little time that he didn't know how to properly acclimate. One last thing, Ray. The moment he heard his name, Ray looked up to see the oracle's concerned expression. Be very wary of that familiar that you keep close. The one you trust so deeply and place in charge of your affairs. The moment he heard this, a brow went up and he blurted out. Ader. That thing. Even I am unaware of what kind of entity they are. They are filled with sheer malevolence and unknown elements. Definitely. Definitely malicious. Ray already knew most of these things about Ader, but there was a certain ominousness that rang from the oracle's warnings that seemed very legitimate. He didn't like the eerie feeling he got about Ader afterwards. I mean, even the system told me to stay away from him, but how possible was that at this point? Even though he claims to be bound to me, I guess there's no real way to verify his claim. It's also possible that he could find a workaround, given all that he knows. It's possible that he's up to no good too. Ray still felt like he could stop him if push came to shove, though, since most of Ader's attacks wouldn't have an effect on him. I suppose I'll be more vigilant for now. Thank you. I will take your counsel seriously. He bowed, smiling broadly at the oracle, who exchanged his gesture. Bye. Yeah. Bye. It struck Ray that this would probably be the last time he was going to lay his eyes on the entity before him. Something about their farewell sounded too lackluster and unsatisfying. He wanted it to be more memorable, at least, for her. Your name? Pardon? Do you remember your name? I believe I was once named Amelia. Well, Amelia. Sorry for hitting you during our last meeting, and for being rude and annoying. Haha. It's fine. She chuckled, covering her lips as she smiled at him. I won't let you down. I promise. All right then, Ray. The oracle no, Amelia waved at him and blessed him the sweetest smile he had ever seen in his life. Take care. Always. Sue. Vuyish. Before Ray could get the last word in, the spatial rupture around him erupted and he and the girl he carried were sent back to the shrine, leaving the standing oracle all alone in the vast space. She stood there for a few seconds, staring into empty space. Then, I have to admit, I am a little envious of you, Asm. She muttered, slowly turning away to look at the floating figure of her new vessel. You have someone who would go to any lengths to save you. The closer she got to the floating elf, the nearer she got to her demise. However, Amelia was not sad at all. To her, she had already perished the moment she became the oracle. If I had even one person who stood up for me back then, would I too have been able to escape the shackles of fate? It was too late to ponder about that now. Her time was up, and it was time for a new vessel to carry on the eternal role of being a slave to the ones above. To play a game with a concluded end. Chapter 728 Betrayal. Bwuish. In a spark of energy, and swirling of distorted space, Ray found himself in the shrine. He stood right in front of the statue, his eyes fixated on how its glowing eyes slowly began to dim, until it became as lifeless as it usually was. Esm was cradled on his arms the whole time, and his expression was absolutely lull. This stoic expression was a full front, though. Deep in his heart, he was struggling with a myriad of emotions that he had to keep suppressed. He understood what was going to happen to Amelia, he had to ponder about Esm, had to think about Alicia, and also about the higher powers that the Oracle spoke of. Then, there was the impending destruction of the world that seemed inevitable according to the one who witnessed the future. All of this information came with their fair share of emotions, a lot of them. He couldn't process them. If he tried, they would overflow and overwhelm his mind. Knowing this, Ray reckoned it was best to abandon those feelings for the moment until he was able to properly rest both physically and mentally. I haven't slept for a few days now. I've been thinking about a lot, exerting myself a lot, and overall just... I need a break. His thoughts flowed. Though he felt they were too disjointed for his tastes, yet another sign that he needed a break. But all of that would have to wait. Right now, Ray had to deal with something else, and it was tied to the fact that he wasn't alone in the shrine. I thought we would be meeting later, he muttered, turning away from the statue while averting his eyes to the one who stood behind him. Didn't you have somewhere you had to be? Adrian. Adrian was standing very close to the entrance of the shrine, and it was clear that he had been waiting for Ray for quite some time. As soon as he heard this question, the smile on his face broadened and he shrugged the whole thing off almost instantly. Instead of replying immediately, he chuckled and walked closer to Ray. I just wanted to see you one final time before leaving. After this, I'll be heading to my next destination. Is that so? Okay then. That's her, right? Esm. What a nice name for a nice lady. Ray tightened his hold on Esm as he frowned at Adrian, who waved his hands in surrender, laughing as he spoke. Sorry. I mean no harm. I'm not interested in her anyway. Who said anything about interest? What did you mean, then? Adrian raised a playful brow, but it was quickly followed by a heavy sigh from Ray. Just stay away from my allies, okay? If there's nothing else, we should part ways here. I see. Adrian smirked. Understood. If that's all, then. I went to the elf dungeon and found it raided already. It seems someone beat me to it, so I wanted to confirm if that was you. Yes, that was me. Ray answered honestly, slightly growing annoyed by Adrian's questions. I knew it. The only one who could possibly do it in this whole continent apart from me, of course, is you. Well, there's Emile too. Again with Emile? Just stop it already. Ray didn't want to get too worked up, since that would just be adding one more emotions to the mix of highly volatile ones already in stock. And so, instead of adding gasoline to the flames, Ray suppressed to the point where the subject matter became one of slight interest to him. You really don't know the value of what you have, Ray. Emile is mine. She's my familiar, and I'll handle her however I please. If you have nothing more of relevance to add, I'll be having my leave now. It was getting more and more tasking, controlling his emotions. He was tempted to use, but his actions would be too unpredictable in that state. I'll just teleport, and... All of a sudden, Ray felt all the mana drain within his body, leaving his tank at the very bottom of zero. Before he could even realize what was happening, Emil's voice echoed within his mind in the loudest voice possible. "I'm done with you, Ray." What? Without his mana, most of his skills were deactivated, as even passive skills required some mana to work on, and buffs needed to multiply pre-existing numbers. With everything at zero, he felt the weight of his exhaustion weigh on him even more, though he still managed everything. The sudden protest that Emil gave added one more emotion to the mixed confusion. "You are a terrible master, and you don't appreciate me at all. Unlike Adrian. He is a far better candidate than you, and he understands my true worth." "What the hell are you talking about?" Ray already knew, so the question was unnecessary. His worst fears regarding Emil had come to pass, and that had to do with her abandonment of him and their bond. Since she was immune to damage, nothing in their contract really bound her. That meant GLUP. She was free to leave. Her slimy black body parted from Ray, and she darted upwards, away from him and towards Adrian. "I don't think so," Ray muttered, easily reaching out to her due to having relatively equal stats as her. He noticed Adrian was just standing still, watching the whole thing with a somewhat neutral expression written on his face. "I see. So, he's not averse to the idea of having Emil, but since he isn't fighting me for her, I can't particularly say he's involved." In a sense, this was Emil's decision. Almost the same way as made her own choice. I. What am I? Thanks to this confusion within him, he hesitated. This gave Emil more than enough time for action. "It's over, Ray. We're through." At that very moment, energy swelled from within Emil, causing all the energy she absorbed from Ray through her skill to pour out in a powerful burst. Mana worth 29,000 was released all at once. The result. Chapter 729 Cautionary Take. Be very wary of that familiar that you keep close. The one you trust so deeply and place in charge of your affairs. As the blast erupted, Ray remembered one of the words that the oracle said to him. Back then, he assumed the one she was referring to was Ader, but was that really the case? She never mentioned a particular name, and kept referring to the familiar in a non-binary manner. The way the oracle framed the warning didn't make it exclusive to just Ader. All along, it could have been Emil. The powerful blast of sheer mana should have easily destroyed the entire shrine and everything around it for at least a few blocks, if not more, yet nothing of the sort happened. Instead, the incredible explosion was contained within a barrier that covered the explosion in its entirety. As a result, only the interior of the barrier was affected by the powerful explosion. Ha! A sharp exhalation rose from within the barrier as a naked figure stepped out, his flesh forming as he emerged from the smoke. Bones, muscles, and every other aspect of his body completely regenerated from the blast that would have reduced anyone and anything in its vicinity into ashes. Rather, due to immortality, the figure did not meet his end. Instead, in about a minute, he had completely recovered from the damage caused by the eruption of his own mana. They're gone, huh? Ray looked around him, even going as far as spreading his senses to everything around him, but he didn't find a trace of both Adrian and Emil. It was clear that they fled the instant she shot him with the mana blast. If I didn't hesitate, I would have. No, there's no use thinking about any of that now. If what the oracle said about his familiar was true, then this was good riddance. Emil was going to be very problematic to deal with as a foe, but now that he knew exactly what she was, he wouldn't hesitate to use whatever means possible to eliminate her. Since Adrian sees no problem taking my familiar, he surely won't have a problem with me destroying her. The real problem was information. Emil knows about, as well as Ader, and a bunch of other secrets of mine. Now that she's working with Adrian, I've pretty much lost all my leverage. Ray's frustration at his own hesitation only grew the more he considered the consequences of letting Emil go. He would have at least sealed her off somewhere, rather than let her get into Adrian's clutches. But where exactly would I seal her? Emil already had the ability to eat through skills, and she could transform into certain individuals including himself and also use their skills. She was his ultimate enemy, in a sense. I didn't realize her dissatisfaction with me had reached such a height, and I also didn't think Adrian would show up so soon. It's also. The more he tried to reason his way through it, the more annoyed he became. In a flash, Ray summoned clothes for himself through spatial magic, making sure he maintained his black aesthetic. I guess my eye patch was the only thing not destroyed. It's pretty durable. Ray felt its texture above his eye. It was a shame he would have to stop using it soon since he had almost fully acclimated to his full vision. Status window. Name, Ray Skylar. Race human. Class singularity. Level 270, Life Force, 13,000, Mana level, 7,000/39,000, Combat ability, 21,550, Stat points, 20,650. Skills. Skills. Alignment neutral good. You have done the impossible and stand at the precipice of power. As such, you now possess the interest of this world. Looks like I lost all the skills that she got from me, which means she's no longer bound to me. It's a good thing I still have them in my, though. So it's not really a loss. Ray thought to himself as he looked at his status window. He then shifted his gaze to the stat points left in his arsenal. Reduced by 10,000, I guess that's how much I took to supplement my mana. Thanks to his swift cognitive process, once the explosion occurred, he had to act and think fast, so he took some stat points and added them to his mana. Afterwards, he used 2 skills at consecutive times. One was his, which was used to send Esma away from their location so she wouldn't be affected by the blast, and the second was a barrier to protect the shrine from the blast. Perhaps this was just his sentiment, or a sense of responsibility, but he didn't want the place destroyed due to his irresponsibility. Now that I think about it, I should have used, but Emil also had, so things would have gotten dicey if she ate through my domain and trapped me in hers. Besides, he couldn't completely forget about Adrian, so he had to play smart. No matter. I know what Adrian is planning. I doubt he lied to me about it, considering he went through all that trouble. Ray sighed to himself. Besides, he also had that skill to help him out if push came to shove. No matter how he looked at it, they were going to meet each other sooner or later, and Ray already knew what he would do once that time arrived. I'm going to beat him up badly. And eliminate Emil as swiftly as possible. This time, he wouldn't hesitate or try to rationalize the situation. The only problem was how to counter Emil, but that was something he would have more than enough time to think about and consider. For now, I'll have to attend to Esma and rest too. A lot was weighing him down, particularly thoughts that were layered in his mind, but he pressed on. With a single spell, he created a spatial rift and vanished to his destination. Chapter 730 Scream of Pain. I'm sorry. With hunched shoulders, he watched as Esm's body lay on the bed he placed her in. Her delicate body displayed a kind of fragileness that nearly made him pity her. Despite his own unfortunate circumstances, he couldn't help feeling even worse for Esme. No. Do I really feel bad for her, or myself? At this point, Ray could feel the emotions within him rise up at a terrible pace. He had suppressed them for so long that their compounded effects were beginning to disturb his mind. Unable to resist any longer, he fell to his knees and released everything at once. Screaming at the top of his lungs, he had tears descending down his eyes as his whole body trembled. He felt bad, very bad. All of those feelings, rage, fear, shame, sorrow, and much more oozed out of his voice, which would have normally filled the room, but thanks to his sound magic, Ray controlled the flow of the noise he was making and restricted it greatly. In essence, not even Emile, who slept beside him, could hear his wails and screams. What am I doing? Despite being the one that was betrayed by Emile, he couldn't help but blame himself for how everything ended up this way. If only I was a better master. He had taken Emile for granted all this time, and he carelessly trusted Adrian. Now that he thought of all these things, he hated himself and all his course of actions. I'm so stupid. He cried out in utter and pure anger. Perhaps this was nothing but self-pity. However, Ray didn't care about that at all. All of the current emotions that nearly suffocated him were very real, too real. He hated himself for feeling so much disgust towards himself, and towards how he handled so many situations with such incompetence. I'm just an average idiot who got blessed with this power. In the end, I haven't changed a single bit. Whether as Yer, or Relix, or whatever other identity that had been framed around him, he was nothing but ordinary. He was nothing else but a fool. Hicksy. Sobs that were buried underneath layers of suppression sprang out, alongside a myriad of other emotions here and there. All of a sudden, every single emotion that was consuming him within that single window vanished in their entirety. In essence, the system intervened. Ray no longer felt the urge to cry, and he even wiped off the tears that streamed down his eyes. His mind became much clearer, and his body felt strangely rejuvenated. All the overwhelming emotions that he felt like would kill him if he didn't release them suddenly seemed like a thing of the distant past. Despite crying and screaming mere seconds ago, it seemed like it happened much further into the past. That was how disconnected he was from the atmosphere he had just created. I've gotten it out of my system, so it's best not to remain too fixated on feelings and focus on the most important matters at the moment. Slowly rising to his feet, he took in a deep breath and began to calculate a bunch of things in his head related to the pertinent issues that he had to address. Before he could even make it very far, though, Ray. A voice stopped him dead in his tracks. His cold heart suddenly felt warm, and he could feel the jitters spread through his brain and throughout the rest of his body. He couldn't resist turning after hearing his name, and he found Esme in the bed looking at him with a slightly curious but mostly emotionless facade. What's going on here? She asked, turning around to see a rather familiar surroundings. This was definitely Ray's residential room in the elf community, which meant she was no longer in the paradise that was the Oracle's domain. The moment she realized this, her expressionless face became that of a frown. I know what's on your mind. But, if you'd allow me to explain what. As Ray spoke, Esme's frown only became more grim, eventually raising her hand to stop him from saying any more. Hold on. Let me get this straight, Ray. Yeah. You took me away from my destiny as the Oracle's heir and brought me back here. Right. Yes. Why would you? Even after I told you. Because Ray wanted to utter certain words, but he let his rational mind take over and stop him from making more poor choices. In the end, the best thing he could do, which would also be the least selfish, would be to tell her all about what happened when she was with the oracle, and how he arrived at a solution. "I'll tell you everything." He would have to tell her about Ziella, about Feralia, Adrian, as well as so many people who played their part in the intricate scheme. In the end, he could find no better way. It might make her angrier, and it's unpredictable what she'll say or do, but... Ray's thoughts trailed as he watched the stoic elf stare at him waiting. I owe her that much. Yes, some might argue that he saved her from assimilating with the oracle and losing all her personality. But since she was willing to do all of that to achieve her goals, Ray was the one who butted in unnecessarily. This was the only way he could offer recompense. I see. So that's how it happened. Esm's voice was cool, and her expression remained unchanging after listening to all of the news. She was even accepting the news rather maturely, all things considered. Thank you, Ray. Eh? For what? He was slightly flustered by Esm's good-natured words. He was sure that she'd flip, but she seemed completely relaxed about the whole thing. You came back for me. You cared for me. You went through such lengths. She made a slight smile as she looked at him. Thank you. At this point, Ray felt warmth slowly permeate his heart. Perhaps he wasn't such a bad person, after all. Esm, That being said, Ray, I can never forgive you for what you did. Esm interrupted him with even more words that rose from the depths of her heart. Her smile had turned into something a lot darker. You ruined my chances of helping my people my way. I know why you did it, and I also considered it. But in the end, I chose that path anyway. I even told you to just. Why yet you? It seemed like Esm would cry, but she actually didn't. Instead, she looked Ray straight in the eyes with a deep glare and moist eyes. You chose my mother instead. A mother I never got to meet. Ray knew just how curious Esm was about her mom. But now, just to ruin her plans, Ray went to sacrifice the one person that Esm wanted to talk to the most. She's gone forever now, Ray. Thanks to you. In response to this, Ray remained silent for the longest time. After a few seconds of silence following Esm's last words, though, Ray had to say something. I know. Chapter 731 Crossroads. I know you're not a bad person, Ray. As Ray heard this, he prepared himself for what was about to come. It wasn't very difficult to steel his heart and consider the very worst when it came to the current situation with Esm. In all honesty, he was very tired. Emotionally speaking, he had exhausted a lot of his energy, and he was practically running on fumes. His expression remained lull, and this carried on throughout his conversation with Esm, or more accurately, Esm's conversation with him. You're an amazing person. I've looked up to you for the longest time too. You saved me more times than I can think of, both directly and indirectly, and I owe a lot to you. Ray still had his heart steeled despite how soft her words were. My feelings for you have not changed as well, even though I really wish they would. I don't hate you or anything, but... As she went through the right words to say, Ray's thoughts were at a standstill. He didn't want to think anything, or feel anything. He just listened. There's just so much going on with me right now. I can't even look you in the eye right now. I'm angry, and sad, and disappointed, and a bunch of other things. And most of this confusion is because of you. At this point, she stared at Ray. Seeing his unassuming expression and calm reaction towards all she was saying. Whether it was for the better or worse, his facade prompted her to continue with her train of thought, hence, finishing what she started. I need some space, Ray. Space. Yes. Space away from you. She sighed, rubbing her forehead as she uttered those words. I don't think I'll be returning to the Western continent with you and Kara. Ray listened to this in silence, not leaking out a sound for even a second. He watched Esm's unease as she uttered those words, but he could also see her resolute eyes and determined expression. He was certain she was very serious in her position, and there was very little he could do to convince her to leave with him. It wouldn't even be unfair for her. I understand, was all he had to say after all she told him. Before she could get another word in, and before he would be tempted to say any more, Ray got up from where he sat and began to walk away. He could feel her eyes on him, and he could also see her even when he turned. It was his back that faced her. Still, he didn't stop until he reached the door and touched the knob. Rest well, Esm. He left afterwards, shutting the door lightly. It could have been his imagination, but Ray heard silent sobs right as he was about to close the door. He shut his eyes, dulled his senses, and completely shut off the room from his mind. For Esm's sake. And for his sake. This was for the best. As soon as he closed the door and took a few steps in the hallway, Ray clutched his chest and felt his racing heart. He had been unable to properly think and feel thanks to his suppression of those aspects of himself, but there was only so much he could do. His longing was not quenched by the system, and his thoughts were slowly getting unbridled by his mind, allowing them to flow. I also have feelings for you, Esm. His cheeks were red, and his hand dug deeper into his chest in an attempt to stop its reaction. Nothing about it stopped though. He felt a surge of excitement, as well as a pang of pain any time the image of the half-elf came to his mind. It was a frustrating experience for Ray, one he wouldn't wish for even his worst enemies. In all honesty, he was very tempted to run back into the room and embrace her. He wanted to apologize once again and tell her to give him another chance. He wanted to hug her, and maybe, just maybe. No. No, I can't. He told himself. It's a bit too late for that. When she revealed her feelings for him, why didn't he tell her he felt the same? Why didn't he hug her or kiss her back? Ray knew the reason well, and Esm was sure to understand it just as certainly. He still had feelings for Alicia. That was yet to change a single bit. Never before had he liked two girls this fiercely, feeling conflicted about which side to pick and which to abandon. It seemed Esm did her best to make the decision easy for him. My weakness led to this outcome. I feel so useless at this point, it's sickening. His thoughts flowed as he inhaled and exhaled deeply. Despite winning the battle for the elves, even getting everything he came to the land of the elves for, Ray didn't feel like a winner. No, not one bit. He felt he had lost too many valuable things, and the truth about Trey weighed heavily on his heart. All of the things he had faced and experienced stripped off the last aspect of his innocence, forcing him to grow up and confront issues he never wanted to. The Ray that currently walked down the hallway was different from the one that first arrived. So much had changed. It's finally time. Ader's smile broadened widely as he floated above the capital of the United Human Alliance. His crimson eyes reflected the city in all its majesty, and his hair danced around with the wind as the rest of his body remained still. Still donning his usual dark suit, he appeared majestic, and while watching the exquisite city from above, he inhaled and exhaled deeply. Once I am done, I am sure Master will be very pleased. He cast his gaze on all the players he set on his playground. There was no need to hold back any longer. Chapter 732 Crisis in the City. Chaos. That was the state that was bestowed upon the capital that fateful day. The city was in flames and echoes of anguish echoed from within it. The residents fled for their dear lives as destruction spread throughout, rapidly consuming everything in its path. As buildings crumbled, lives were snuffed out in an instant. Men, women, children, the devastation everywhere did not discriminate. It took the lives and future of all of them without making any exception. Monsters emerged from nothingness as if appearing from thin air to attack the city in an overwhelming horde. They broke down all that stood in their way, not intelligent enough to organize any sort of direction. Their only purpose was chaos, and they performed it well. If it had only been monsters that attacked, perhaps there could be some semblance of hope for these people, these helpless people of the capital. But there was more. Dragons, 2 of them, hovered above the great city, partaking in the banquet of chaos that was being held. A single breath of theirs was able to destroy buildings, and their control over the aerial landscape made them invincible. Nothing could stop them. And so they continued. On and on. Amidst all of this chaos, a certain group of 5 watched from a rather tall building. They took in the tragedy that they were privy to, the fall of the precious haven for humanity in the harsh world of H-Tray. But these people couldn't care less. After all, they were strangers. The damage is a lot more than I expected. This is... damn. One of the deserters whispered as he stared at the burning buildings that were closest to his position. He could hear wailings and tons of cries from beneath him, and it only grew worse. The sickening effect of the city's destruction was the cry of so many innocents. Their death was towards a good cause, and not all of them would perish, but still. It was very hard to watch and listen to their screams. When are we going to assist them? I think we should go now. Wait a few moments more. Felicia muttered, her eyes fixed on the magnificent sight of devastation that was spread out before her. It wasn't that she enjoyed the destruction of lives and properties so much, but her plan was simply a pragmatic one. We need to make them desperate enough. A few more seconds, and we'll swoop in. She and her allies would be the heroes, and by the time they were done dispatching all of the creatures, they would all be recognized by the people of the city. It was perfect in every sense of the word. Justin, Clark, Trisha, and Belle agreed to be on our side, so they are also on standby. We're the ones who get to shine during this period, but they'll serve as help to rescue and mitigate the damage done. Everything had been planned already, and Felicia was glad to see everything going exactly according to her master plan. Okay, everyone. She turned to all of her allies. Like the obedient dogs that they were, all of them waited for their orders, their faith completely placed in her. It made Felicia happier than ever. Let's go. The plan was simple, and it was executed that way as well. Felicia and her team would be scattered to various parts of the city, aiding people and defeating powerful monsters in order to be recognized by the people as the heroes who stopped such a great tragedy. They would be heroes in all senses of the word. And so, as Felicia raced throughout the city, she spotted people who required help, and also the monsters who desired to do them harm. Smiling to herself, she dashed forward and prepared her twin stilettos, her preferred choice of weapons. She was also donning light armor, all of them provided for by the Reaper group. Right now, she was overflowing with so much power that it felt too unreal. Still, she wondered how she would fare against a monster. Her opponents were a pair of orcs, massive, brutish, tough, and immensely strong. Felicia wondered how the Reaper group got their hands on so many monsters and transported them to the capital without notice, but chose not to think too deeply about the matter. Anything was possible through magic, after all. Swoosh! In quick movements, she was able to dispatch such hulking entities with relative ease. Ah! That easy. It wasn't that they were weak. She was just strong. She was getting a lot of assistance from her equipment, but her physical abilities weren't particularly lacking either. At this rate, we should be done faster than I calculated. That's good. Scouring for her next destination, Felicia looked around while her thoughts were still mulling over the possibility of such an organized tragedy like this. She already knew there was a black market and criminal underbelly in this world. Yes, it was taken down, but there was always a good chance that they weren't fully gone. If she had to guess, the Reaper group was the one running it now. If that's the case, they could use some unknown transportation network, forbidden magic, or any other means, to achieve this grand scheme of theirs. According to the Reaper group's supposed leader Rebel, this plan had been in the works for a very long time. So it only made sense that the monsters and all the other resources necessary for such a large-scale attack had been gathered over the years. Even the dragons. Felicia looked up and saw the two creatures circling the city, creating artificial destruction to further increase the fear of the people. I can't kill even one of those things, but thankfully we don't have to fight them. The dragons were slaves of the Reaper group. All they had to do was pretend as if they used some skill or spell on them, so they fought themselves and vanished in one huge explosion. That way, they would still be recognized as the heroes of the capital. Yes, this whole thing does seem a little excessive. A lot of people will die, but at the very least, they're already being evacuated. Felicia thought to herself, trying to sate whatever was left of her conscience. In her eyes, the Reaper group was the real villain here. She and her allies were simply the heroes doing their best to mitigate losses and to ensure as many people as possible survived. And once we're done, we'll be recognized as the heroes. Look at those fools. Ha ha ha. Indeed. Such fools. Cat-Aaron and Shaya stood and watched from the outskirts of the capital, witnessing as the great city was now in flames thanks to the excessiveness of the humans who had their own nefarious intentions in mind. It was very easy to manipulate gullible humans, especially those that showed conceit. Ah, it seems it's about time for the evacuation, Cat-Aaron said with a wide grin, glancing at Shaya, who seemed overly excited for what would come next. The two then proceeded to glance at Retta, who was standing behind them, smiling lovingly at the two of them. She was completely under their control. Now, then. Cat-Aaron grinned devilishly. Shall we begin our task? Chapter 733, The Pleasure of Dragons. The plan was simple, according to the dragons. Cat-Aaron and Shaya were positioned close one of the few evacuation gates that the capital had for situations like this. Their comrades, the backup dragon generals sent by the other dragon lords that were in support of their master's plan, were stationed in the other areas as well. With this network of dragons, they were going to ensure no one was left alive among those who escaped the incinerated city. I never would have thought humans could be so vile, though. They're laying their own city to waste by using monsters. All for their own selfish ambitions. Cat-Aaron muttered, though she showed nothing like remorse or pity as she spoke. Simply pure amusement. They are probably thinking that, since many of the denizens will be evacuated, their plan will still succeed. They have no idea at all, do they, Shaya? Shaya nodded and giggled like a child having fun. Anyone who escapes will die by our hands. No one is going to escape. They will all be destroyed. The two dragon ladies nodded in conjunction. Indeed. Everyone was going to perish at their hands. Right as they thought this, the humans began to pour out like maggots, all of them shrieking and crying as they fled for their dear lives. The suffering they must have endured to be among those who made it out was evident on their faces, but none of that mattered to Shayat and Kat-Aaron. They simply watched as the humans ran forward, towards the bridge that would lead to the safe woods. They were both waiting in front of the bridge. What are you two doing? Where did you come from? The man at the forefront yelled at the dragons. He was dressed as a knight, and he was responsible for leading the people out of the city. Due to the situation, he was rather impatient, and rightfully so. He had a deep frown, and his evident glare only made his face appear worse. Since the girls did not respond to him on time, he yelled once again. Get out of the way. We don't have much time. At this point, the people behind him began to push, since more denizens were trying to leave the confines of the burning city. They were being held up by the clogged front. What the hell? Move it. Hurry up already. I don't want to die. What's holding them up over there? Let us go. Please let us go. We're all going to die, aren't we? Please. Please no. More words erupted, and with more pushing in tow, the knight decided he had to shove the ladies out of the way, stepping forward to do so. The reason for his initial hesitation was due to the appearance of the two girls. Their skins were flawless, and their hair magnificent. The robes they donned were of only the highest quality, which made him suspect they were nobles or people of high standing. Since the rest of his comrades were still busy fighting, it was clear he was on his own here. He couldn't identify what kind of nobles they were, and since he was already pressed for time, he had to shove them aside somehow. If you won't, then I'll move. Why? Explode. Sploosh. The knights instantly erupted into a blast of meat and blood spraying over the horrified people who watched this happen. All their eyes widened in horror as they witnessed this sight. The gory remains of the knight, the pinkish flesh and numerous innards stuck to the bodies of those it landed on, but the blood was different. It gathered above Shayat, who watched the whole thing with glee. Kat-Aaron smiled at her comrade, amused by how she started the rather fun round of killing humans. I guess it's my turn. Raising her hand and pointing it towards the humans, she called forth the name of her skill. In an instant, an entity manifested right in front of her. The being floated in the air and was coated in white. It was translucent, almost incorporeal, as its oversized robe danced about it. In all senses of the word, it resembled an angel. This manifestation stood still as Kat-Aaron broadened her smile and caused her eyes to glow with sheer wickedness. The confused, scared, and utterly stunned expression of the helpless humans did not stop her from giving the damning order to the entity she just brought forth. Kill them all. Whoosh. In a flash, much faster than the blink of an eye, the entity rushed past the humans, having a scythe in its hand. In one wide swing, hundreds of heads flew into the air. Sploosh. The blood gathered right above Shayat, making the orb of blood even larger than ever. And so, as the summoned catastrophe easily mowed down the humans that tried to escape, their bodies were drained of the blood they had down to the last ounce. The slaughter caused pandemonium, as everyone began to run back, even preferring the destruction that the city offered to the execution that the dragons were granting them. Unfortunately for the runaways, none of them were fated to survive this encounter. Rain of blood. In an instant, the sphere vanished from Shayet's position and created a massive cloud above all the humans beneath. Then, in a single second of sheer silence, tit, tat, tit, tat, it released raindrops, bloody raindrops. They were like bullets, and a single one piercing the body of the humans caused them to explode due to the pressure they generated. Each bloody raindrop had a corrosive element, making them capable of eating and piercing through anything. Adding the immense power they packed, it was overkill for the humans to receive even 2 of the raindrops, talk less of a shower of it. You went and killed them all, Shayat. No fair. Kat-Erin watched the whole mutilation, observing as the blood of all the fallen went into her sphere. Truly, was one of the most powerful skills to possess, and it made Shayat an incredibly dangerous person even by dragon standards. All I gave them was a mild drizzle, though. She muttered, looking at the devastated landscape with innocent eyes. One would never believe she was a mass murderer with the cute face she made. Guess I went too far. Chapter 734 The Pleasure of Dragons. Ha 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 ha. The dragons all laughed as the city before them was burning up, completely laid to waste. The corpses of the innocents who attempted to evacuate also littered the ground a good distance from them, from all evacuation points no less. There were 4 gates that led outside the capital, and with 2 dragons assigned to 2 each, the results ended the same for everyone who attempted to flee. They all died, and the exits were sealed so the rest would suffer within the stifling world of the capital. No one had any doubt about it, the humans were ruined. Thank you for your hard work, comrades. Kat-Erin smiled at the dragons who stood before her and her comrade. There were a total of 6 of them, 2 contributed from each lord allied with the White Dragon Lord. They had rendezvoused a little beyond the outskirts of the capital, though they could see all that went on in the ruined city from where they were. It was all so fulfilling, and from the looks of all the dragons involved, it was clear they felt the same thing. We do not deserve such high praise, Lady Kat-Erin. You and Lady Shayat are our seniors. The most mature of the dragons said with a smile, bowing slightly to her. Despite them being men, they acted so humbly among 2 women. This was because, unlike certain societies and cultures that incorporated sexism in their practices, the dragons did not care for sex or gender differences. What mattered most was ability and rank. We are all generals here, so there's no need to fuss over seniority. Kat-Erin said with a dismissive wave. Though she was satisfied to know that the people before her knew how to deliver proper respects. Still, you are a part of the 7 squads. It is my dream to one day join a squad, so I'll work very hard to prove myself worthy to the Empire. Me too. I'll do my best as well. All of the dragon generals expressed immense readiness to serve, and that pleased Kat-Erin very much. It reminded her of her time in the academy, and she figured the generals before her only finished their course only recently. When did you pass from the academy? She went on to ask. It was a somewhat strange question to ask, since they were only related by professional strands. Still, since a general belonging to one of the special squads of the Empire was asking, the general did not hesitate to answer. About 7 years ago. I was dispatched for 3 years in the southern continent, and I spent the rest in the western battlefield mainly performing training and management roles to my juniors. Kat-Erin smiled and nodded at the stiff, awkward, but well-meaning words of the dragon before her. Not bad. You've racked quite a bit of achievement already. I suppose you were quite exceptional in the south. Ha ha ha. You render me too much praise. I haven't gone to the south yet, but that's more due to politics than personal abilities. In any case, he's had some good experiences since I hear that's where the war is most intense. Kat-Erin was sure this general didn't really fight in the front lines, but it was still a good experience he had to put in his portfolio. The intensity of the battlefield was probably too much for him, so he requested to be transferred to the west. Since he is still fresh, I can't blame him. Usually, the exceptional ones are the kind that thrive in the south. All of these were random thoughts that she had about her junior, but they were nothing serious. The only reason she had such a long train of thought was out of consideration for him joining one of the squads of the Empire. It'll take some time for him to accomplish that, but I suppose it's possible. As long as he wasn't too ambitious, he would be able to join one of the lower rank squads. There's no real need to tell him all of that, though. Katerin thought to herself with a light shrug, so she simply let the general off with a few words of encouragement. Just keep working hard. I hope I meet you one day in a squad evaluation event. I'll try my best, ma'am. The moment he said this in a stiff salute, the other generals also did the same, all raising their voices with pure energy. We will do our best as well. It seemed they all had the same ambition as the first guy, but none of that surprised her. Dragons were naturally attuned to warfare, and nothing motivated them more than rank and merit. They all desired to bring glory to the Empire through their actions. She was no different, though her real allegiance belonged to her master, the White Dragon Lord. She was only loyal to the Emperor because her lord served him. I'd never say such a thing to anyone, but that is truly how I feel. She smiled to herself, even blushing slightly. She simply adored her master that much. Bzzzztzz. She felt a buzz on the communication device with her, instantly recognizing who was trying to reach her. Master. Her eyes widened in glee as she brought out the device and showed Shaya, who was instantly brimmed with joy the moment she saw it as well. Katerin signaled the generals before her that she would be excusing herself, and in the blink of an eye, the two subordinates of the White Demon Lord created considerable distance between themselves and the other generals. Part of the reason they did this was so the generals wouldn't be able to listen to whatever information their master wanted to give them, just in case it was confidential. It was best to respond to such calls in private, and Katerin was sure the other generals would have done the same if it was their respective lords calling. However, there was another reason they preferred taking the call of their master in private. Hee. Can't wait. Can't wait. They picked up the call and awaited the kind words of their master as they greeted her with the most excited tone one could have. Master, did you see how? Master, how have you? Before any of their greetings could land, though, the loud voice of the White Dragon Lord pierced the air in an unsettling manner. You fools! Do you have any idea what you've done? Yet. Katerin and Shaya both had stunned looks on their faces as they heard the voices of their master. They thought, for sure, that Lord Freya would congratulate them for their exploits. Sure, killing a bunch of humans wasn't that big a deal, but still. She was always fond of praising them for every little thing. This was one of the reasons they were so attached to her. The mere fact that she was using such a harsh tone proved that they had done something extremely wrong. Shaya's distracted gaze moved to the other dragon generals, perhaps out of fear that they had heard the words of their master despite the anti-sound field that was in place. However, she was shocked to see that each duo was also on their respective calls. It seemed their lords were also speaking to them. Their reactions also contained distress. At this point, the two dragon generals realized that something was wrong somewhere. Chapter 735 Curtains Rise. You imbeciles! Why haven't you been picking your calls despite how many times I tried to reach you? This next question shocked them just as much as the first. See calls. They both looked at each other with stunned expressions on their faces. The moment they felt a vibrating feeling, they picked the device immediately. Neither of them would even dream of ignoring the call of their master, which was what made them too stunned to even speak. They were beyond confused. Master! We did as you instructed us. We also picked your call as soon as we. Save your excuses. The rage-filled voice of the Lord frightened the two girls, almost to the point of tears. They were silently sobbing and trembling without even realizing what they did wrong. You've ruined everything. Even after I trusted you. After I told you the importance of the plan. Even after I raised you to be obedient and perfect, you still messed this up? Why? Why did you do this? Why now? Why me? This was the very first time they had heard their master being this pathetic. Yes, she was incredibly furious, and she didn't hide that fact, but there was something else. She was frightened, horrified, and downright anxious. She seemed just as scared as they were. What did we do, master? Why are you speaking like this? Shaya cried out loud, her tears flowing now. Katerin still tried to maintain her composure, but the more immature girl was already sobbing very loudly in her confused state. Are you crazy? Playing dumb at a period like this? What ungrateful and idiotic bitches you are. I regret ever taking you in. You've ruined me. AHH. You've destroyed me. Those words stung them to their core. The two generals felt like shattering to pieces the moment they heard their everything hurl such hurtful words at them. However, before they could even properly process what was said, and perhaps give a response to their master, they received another shock. You broke the emperor's rules. I warned you. I told you. Yet. You fools. Katerin and Shaya exchanged puzzled glances once again. Their confusion reached another height since they never did any such thing. They followed the instructions they received to the letter, so this made no sense. No sense at all. You've ruined me. Curse you both. Curse why? ZZZTZZZZ. All of a sudden, the line got disconnected. It didn't seem like either side ended the call, but the effect was most likely due to some kind of interference. However, how possible was that? The device they used was a very secure and sophisticated one. The only ones who could probably interfere with such an item would be fellow lords, or perhaps Master. Fear gripped the heart of the two girls as soon as they heard the line get disconnected. Despite the mean words they received from her, their feelings towards her hadn't changed one bit. In fact, they blamed themselves and hated themselves for her sake. Their master couldn't be wrong, which meant they had messed up somewhere. But what exactly did they do wrong? Why did master say those? Right as Shaya was breaking the dreadful silence between the two of them, they heard a round of applause from a single person. The claps rang loudly, but something about them was hollow. The two girls instantly turned in the direction of the applause, right behind them, and found a man standing there, both palms smashing against each other to generate the sound. He had beautiful red hair that matched his eyes. His ebony skin glowed immaculately, blending perfectly with his black suit. With a charming face, and a somewhat unsettling smile, he rested his gaze on the girls who watched him with complicated emotions. Who is he? I don't know. They didn't know what was worse, the fact that they didn't sense him until he clapped, or the sense of affinity they had towards him despite resembling a human. None of it made any sense, but before they could express their confusion, they noticed the pile of corpses that lay at his feet. All 6 of them. Dead dragon generals. He had killed them all within such a short span of time, and without even drawing their attention. Even at that, he didn't look fazed or scathed. He wasn't even out of breath. His eyes were calm, and his smile was perfectly genuine. The blood of their comrades still clung to his hands, making it evident that he was the one responsible for their demise. After he got their attention, though, he brought a handkerchief from his pocket and slowly cleaned the crimson blood from his palm. all while maintaining eye contact with the girls. For a moment, they were all silent. No one spoke, either due to some unspoken tension or confusion, but right as Katerin was about to open her lips, Ada raised a finger to his lips and commanded silence. Before she could even offer any resistance, the world around her became distorted and reality came crashing down on her. The environment that she stood on was completely altered, and it reflected something that nearly drove her and her partner mad. We are still in the capital. And no way. It was impossible, yet they could see the walls and buildings, and everything around them all reminiscent of the city that they had just recently seen from afar. Was this teleportation? An illusion? No. It was neither of those things. Ahhh. Katerin's eyes were wide as she spotted the bodies of several people that littered the ground a small distance from them. They resemble the ones she and Shaya killed, the ones who were trying to escape from the burning city. What were doing inside the capital? Why? What was happening? You appear quite confused, and that is only natural. Ader smiled, finally done with wiping his hand clean of the blood. He disposed of the handkerchief, and it instantly faded into the wind almost as if it never existed, to begin with. It's about time. Chapter 736, A Devil's Game. Ader felt pleased. Seeing the look of confusion, uncertainty, and a tinge of fear on the faces of the two dragons amused him, to the point where he couldn't stop smiling at them. Moments like these were what he lived for. Ahhh. The bliss. He beamed with slight arousal, enjoying the havoc he had wreaked. But this was not enough. He had hardly plunged them to the very depths of despondency. This was simply the surface, a husk incomparable to the main dish. He already knew what would make this moment perfect. Truth. That always makes everything blend the best. And so, as he stood before his stupefied dragons, unveiling the curtain that had blinded them all this time, he was able to get another glimpse of satisfaction. Surely, their limited minds were already beginning to grasp the current reality. The fact that they had been fooled into thinking they left the capital. But no. Merely doing this could leave the answer open-ended. It was possible that they would believe he teleported them to this place, or that this was indeed the illusion, and reality was what they previously perceived. No, that won't do. He thought to himself, resolute in fully immersing them in the bitter vat of truth that he had prepared. What better way to do that than to tell them myself? You killed humans in the capital. You broke the rules of your emperor as a result, ruining your benefactor and their grand plan. Ader declared to them, refusing to delve into the full details. Which made the girls exhibit even more shock. And no. No way. Why you lying? We were definitely at the borders of. You were under my illusion, fools. He gloated, chuckling at their stupidity. For the most superior race in this world, you lot are quite stupid. Even now, after being confronted by evidence which included the panicked words of their master, they still clung to the false reality they previously perceived. It's a waste of time to relate with them much further. He sighed to himself. It seemed he would have to be satisfied with this measure of despair from the dragons and savor the rest of his meal from the deserters. Those are even bigger fools. Still, the results of their actions, in conjunction with the strings I pulled with this duo, ended up making for quite an interesting narrative. The humans that were sacrificed in this entire endeavor were corrupt nobles and criminals that were procured by his shadow slaves, hence no innocents were harmed. Master would give me an earful if I went too far, so I had to compensate. Still, the results were pretty satisfactory. Even with his limited resources, he achieved his goals. Since you broke the rules of your emperor, your fates have already been sealed. Still, I suppose the ones who will suffer most for your actions are the lords who conspired to ruin the city. Ader's words caused the two dragons to tremble. Their eyes widened as they recalled the words of their master, Lady Freya, and immediately realized just why she had sounded so intense. The actions of a subordinate, whether good or bad, would reflect on the master. That meant, I can only imagine how much they will suffer for your error. Ader grinned devilishly, both hands in his pockets as he inhaled deeply. All of this was merely child's play for him. It was petty, but fun. Why you? You caused this, didn't you? Master. Master is. We need to go. Now. Katerin quickly grabbed the mumbling Shayat, her own tears also slowly rolling down her cheeks. They now realized just how much they had sinned, and the consequences of their actions. Still, more than anything, they wanted to help their master. Even if it was at the cost of their lives, they wanted to save her just as she saved them. If we hurry, we can confess to all of this and say we performed all of this without her knowledge. We must absolve her at all cost. That was Katerin's rationale. The moment she grabbed Shayat, she swiftly turned around to get the last person on her list but didn't find anyone of the sort. Suddenly, she broke into a cold sweat. A gnawing feeling began to swell within her, and her vision blurred while her heart raced the moment she considered what exactly could have happened. Before her imagination took over, or her suspicions were fully realized, she heard a voice that completely caused her heart to shatter. Looking for someone. The voice belonged to Retta, the same person that Katerin had been searching for. Slowly turning her head to the direction where Ader previously stood, she found Retta standing there, hands in her pocket as she smiled at the two despairing girls. Why you were? And no way. Katerin now understood why she felt some sort of affinity when she met Ader despite having zero attraction towards men. This man. He was Retta all along. Now do you understand? You were playing my game right from the start. As soon as Retta said this, she morphed back into Ader very seamlessly too. The man before them oozed such sheer malice, but the amusement he displayed made the immensely tense situation feel like nothing but a pastime activity. He wasn't even being serious. Why you? You. Shaya yelled out, hot tears streaming down her eyes as Katerin took the route of silence. The rage and sorrow that filled the voice of the roaring dragon shook the entire area. The air began to tremble violently, and hot energy slowly rose from everywhere around her. It seemed she had finally pushed past her despair and was driven purely by instinctive rage. You did this. You caused this. I will kill you. These words only made Ader's grin widen even more as he waited patiently for her assault. Before Katerin could say a word, or join her in the fight, Shaya unleashed her two S-tier skills, completely resolved to destroying the man before her. Chapter 737, A Devil's Game. Most people that knew the white duo considered Shaya to be the weakest. However, that was far from the case. She had two S-tier skills that were mainly for destruction and absolute annihilation, making her perfectly adept in combat. Yes, Katerin's abilities were much rarer, and was also a lot more versatile especially, but even she knew that when it came to a fight, there were very few generals that could stand up to her, and she wasn't among them. Her two skills were too powerful to be properly countered, especially if they were used simultaneously. Allowed Shaya to freely control the blood of her target, even at very long distances, and to also manipulate blood freely. She could even manipulate her own blood, applying it to several uses, including the improvement of her already high physical abilities. The true importance of this skill was the blood bank aspect it had, which allowed Shaya to save up the blood of her victims for temporary or permanent storage. That meant, as long as she kept storing the crimson nectar of her victims, she would never run out of blood to control. Then this was, to put it simply, a buff skill. It improved all the abilities that Shaya had, both her stats and her skills, making the activation much faster and their effects much stronger. Applying these two skills at once made it so that Shaya could use her incredibly powerful and corrosive blood at incredibly fast speeds, with even greater power than normal. Most dragons wouldn't stand a chance even if they had defensive skills to back them up. And so, it was clear what Ader's fate would be. "I'll fucking ruin you." Shaya didn't want to waste any time, or even hold back, when it came to this opponent. She simply released all the blood she had saved up, creating an incredibly large sphere above her, enough to cast a shadow over the land around them for a few kilometers. She didn't want to just drop such a large supply of blood, though. "Armor!" she yelled. Instantly, all of the blood condensed to form a metallic-looking substance that descended on her in swift fashion. In the blink of an eye, the blood that was large enough to cast a shadow for kilometers was now donned by Shaya as a full-body armor. The entire armor was crimson, but it had a silvery glow to it, making it seem like authentic armor. The earth around her shattered the moment she put it on, most definitely due to the weight. However, none of that bothered her since she could fly. On her hand was a sword, also made from the concentrated blood. In fact, half of all the blood was used to create it, making it incredibly powerful. Her armor served as a power boost thanks to its corrosive effect and the powerful pressure it packed, but also a tough defensive shell which would protect her from any form of harm. Then, there was the effect of the second skill, which made her even more powerful. The space around her was already beginning to warp, contorting violently thanks to the sheer magnitude of her strength. In this form, she was invincible. Boom. The moment she darted forward, aiming right for Ader, a massive sonic boom echoed across the area, sending vibrations to the surrounding lands. She was much faster than the eyes could process, and for every distance she covered, even more power was applied to her already incredible pressure. Bursts of flaming energy danced around her as she charged forward. In no time at all, she had closed the distance between her and Ader, about to pierce him right in the heart. Then, squelch! Shaya crashed to the ground in a massive explosion, creating an even more destructive explosion around her. However, this wasn't because she caught her prey. Instead, drip, drip, drip. Yet, her eyes widened as soon as she regained her bearing, feeling hot liquid drip from her dominant right arm, or, to put it more accurately, the gaping hole that was left there. Her right arm was completely gone. Right as she realized this, she heard a light thud in front of her. It was her arm. Her arm had been flung towards her by the man whose heart was still beating. He looked at her with a relaxed smile, his devilish grin burning deep into her mind. Right there and then, she witnessed Kataryn taking advantage of his distraction to attack him, but a swift backhand jab on her face sent her flying away from him. It seemed nearly effortless on his part. "Do you understand now? This is no illusion or trickery." His voice oozed disgustingly in her ears as he confidently walked towards her. "I'm just much stronger than you are." All of this was a mere farce to him, child's play to while away time until he could really have genuine and interesting conflict. GGRRRRRR. Shaya could not accept that. "Shut up!" she yelled, grabbing her blade from the arm on the floor, attempting to stab him with it. Once again, though. Squelch! Her left arm was sliced off, and she witnessed how he used his hand as a blade to do the job. As her blood splashed in the air, she witnessed his wild grin. D. All her blood from both her right and left arm were commanded and sent towards him in the form of several needles. However, right before they reached him, they stopped completely. Blood manipulation of this level is useless against me, he said with a dismissive tone, almost as if he couldn't be bothered. Shaya broke into a cold sweat at this point. She could not use her trump card against him, and even when she tried controlling his blood, nothing responded to her. It was at this point that she realized it. He's not a living being. He can't be. Whatever this existence was, he couldn't exist in this world. He couldn't be allowed to. Chapter 738, A Devil's Game. What is he? Shaya found herself kneeling before the man she stared widely at, limbless and powerless. Her armor had proven useless in his presence, and even her enhanced strength seemed non-existent when compared to his overwhelming might. She didn't seem strong at all. How did he? How can I? A far corner from her was Katerin, who was still on the ground, groaning from the casual hit that Ader had given her not too long ago. This man was toying with them. He had been toying with them for so long when he had the ability to just finish them off quickly. I'll make you regret it. I'll make you regret underestimating me. Underestimating us. Dragons had special ways of learning magic different from how humans and other races perceived it. They had mana circuits in their bodies that regulated the flow of mana and allowed them to control even more mana than the other creatures could possibly achieve. Usually, these circuits couldn't be tampered with, but since Shaya could control her blood and with active, she had even more control over this skill. She could artificially control the circuit. I'll probably die from this, but I don't care, she thought to herself with grated teeth and bloodshot eyes. As long as I can kill this bastard. Using her technique, she caused her mana circuits to explode within her, sending her into a world of pain, but also granting her an explosive amount of mana that circulated around her body in no time. The energy caused unstoppable tremors that destabilized the earth itself. Shaya's body acted on pure instinct, and she used her mouth to pick up her blade in an attempt to slash him with it. Her body radiated burning energy, and that power extended to the blade she now wielded. She didn't know why her arms weren't healing, but that didn't matter. Because she was going to win. But squelch. This time, her own heart was pierced by the blade, almost as soon as she moved forward to cut him up. It was instantaneous. Inevitable. She couldn't even see his movements this time. She didn't realize it when he took the blade from her and pierced her body with it. All it had been a blur. Looks like you're already finished. She heard the cold words of the man before her, seeing as her mercilessly stared down at her. In his eyes, she was nothing. She suddenly began to feel her body being raised up, still feeling the pain of her heart being pierced and her circuits being destroyed. Arg. Almost like she was nothing more than a lump of meat, she was flipped into the air, rolling right above Ader, who then aimed a finger upward to shoot. Is this how I die? Her body was paralyzed, and excruciating pain kept ravaging her body. Pain and sorry were the only things she felt at that point. And fear. I don't want to die. Master. Lady Freya. Save me. Save him. Explode. Ader's voice was the last thing she heard before her entire body inflated and burst into several portions of entrails and gooey blood. Sploosh. The rain of blood fell all over the area, especially on Ader, who stood at the center with an amused smile on his ebony face. Shia. Cat Aaron yelled out, but it seemed like all of it fell on deaf ears. Ader raised a finger to his lips and gestured her to hush. He wanted to savor the moment, the chaos, the death, the destruction. All of it was inhaled by him, feeling the perverse reckoning of the enemy. Anyone who had the misfortune to lay eyes on the scene would consider Ader the villain and the poor girls in white as the damsel in distress. But, there was no hero to rescue these girls. No hope at all. Why you? You monster! I can't believe I ever loved you. Cat Aaron yelled out in tears, but the moment she finished her words of pain and rage, Ader appeared right in front of her. His intimidating presence caused her heart to nearly stop. She could hardly feel anything but the loud pounding in her head, almost forgetting to even breathe. Tough. Ader replied. And then, Cat Aaron found her vision being upturned as her head was lopped off her body. In one merciless stroke, Ader had sliced it off, and the last thing she witnessed was her body crumbling to the ground while he stood in front of it, whispering words that was lost to her knowledge. Right before her vision shut permanently, her failing mind translated those two words. Hollow technique. Ader stood amidst the wreckage of the city, a satisfied grin on his face. He appeared completely unfazed by the devastation his brief interaction with the two dragons caused, despite it being in the capital. I might have to trouble Master to use his time abilities to sort it out. But I'm sure he wouldn't mind once I show him the results I have. His thoughts flowed seamlessly as he stared into the sky above his head. I wonder. A wry smile formed on his face and he shook his head gently. No. It's not yet time. To distract himself from the thought he was about to make, Ader thought about the deserters. They were the final piece of the puzzle, and their elimination was vital for wrapping up the entire scenario. Should I interfere? No. I think I'll just leave them be. According to the scenario he established, they would all meet a pretty natural conclusion anyway. If he was interested, he would have preferred to witness their despair personally, but he was currently too bored to care. I will just let them suffer in their delusion. Already having knowledge of how they will die is more than enough satisfaction for me. Upon finally concluding on his decision, shadows manifested around him. And he let the darkness swallow him whole, vanishing from his position in an instant. Chapter 739 Felicia's Downfall. Ha! Ha! Felicia and her goons were breathing heavily as they approached the royal estate, all covered in dirt and grime. Their armors clinked loudly and their hurried footsteps echoed with impatience as they swiftly closed in on the gates. They had killed hordes of monsters, finally exterminating them all, and now it was time to retrieve their prize. Endgame is in sight. Felicia licked her lips as she kept her sights forward. Several thoughts were already running through her mind, but she controlled herself and chose to postpone all the grand thoughts until after the day was over. He. Did you see Justin? I can't wait to see him after this is all over. Livia was especially giddy, causing eyes to roll again. This infatuation of hers had only grown stronger after Felicia controlled Justin and made him a part of their team. She also promised that she would make Justin fall in love with Livia, which further made the girl crazy over him. Of course, Felicia didn't mind proceeding with the deal since it would make Livia happy and more indebted to her. The others, Livia, Byron, Devin, and Caden, also had desires, and she was sure to grant them all once she got what she wanted. Once they arrived at the gate, they found no one at the entrance. That made sense, considering every single soldier was dispatched to hand out the monsters plaguing the city. So, they simply opened the gates and barged into the compound, their target being the Royal Council. However, the moment they all stepped in, they saw an army of both warriors and mages standing opposite them, with the two members of the Royal Council standing in front of them. Why are those two here? Felicia thought to herself as she saw the Conrad and Vita, but that was only the tip of the iceberg. Why are there so many soldiers? Shouldn't they be out quelling the conflict? And why are they staring at us like this? The gaze of everyone was that of disgust, rage, and slight hints of fear. It almost felt like they were being viewed as the opposite of heroes. What in the world is hap? Halt! All of you. Brutus emerged from behind a group of soldiers, and so did Luciel. The two of them had stern frowns on their faces, and they were even outfitted with enchanted items that brimmed with incredible power. They stood right in front of the royal counselors, almost as if they recognized what Felicia planned to do with them. You are hereby under arrest for the murder of all the recognized nobles of the United Human Alliance, as well as treason against the Royal Council. What the hell are they talking about? Felicia was bamboozled by the information that she didn't even know what to say or how to respond. The allies she had behind her also seemed as shell-shocked as her, and she could see from their expressions that they were scared. They had all been assured that their plans would flow seamlessly, yet what was with this obstruction right as they were about to get to their goals? It was absurd. It was unfair. This shouldn't be happening. It wasn't in the plan, and Felicia knew it. Maybe we should. Don't try to escape and fight back. We won't let you. Luciel added, almost as if she could read her mind. Escape? Fight back. What are you talking about? Caden was the one who spoke up, completely taking over the conversation on their end since Felicia was dead silent. We just killed so many monsters and even helped civilians escape, yet you're branding us as traitors? What the hell? Yeah. That's right. Livia yelled out too. We got ourselves all dirty and exhausted for your sake, yet. Screw this. We should be rewarded instead. Byron protested. What the hell is wrong with you people? What is going on here? Felicia, what is happening? Devin turned to Felicia, who was still silent. Her heart was racing, and even when she was already hearing the murmurs of her allies, she didn't have the courage to speak. After all, in her hand right where the blade that she tightly held was supposed to be was the severed head of the noble that she directly served. She held the thing by its hair, but she could see the head. She could smell its stench. And then, turning back to look at her comrades, she could see them holding heads of various nobles as well. She could see the entrails and blood of humans decorating their armor, all of it proving their guilt. Felicia wondered if she was the only one among her allies who could see this. Everyone seemed to be complaining, unable to recognize why the Royal Council was hounding them for treason, but she could see what they were seeing. It was pretty bad. We've been set up by the Reaper group. There's no point trying to continue the mission or argue our case. It was over. The best thing they could do now was escape, and even with Luciel and Brutus trying to prevent their escape, Felicia believed they had the higher numbers. We're otherworlders, with equipment from the Reaper group. We should still be able to. Right as she was about to complete her thoughts, the gate behind them opened up, and the otherworlders of the Alliance emerged from beyond it. Belle and Clark. Trisha and Justin were absent, but the mere fact that the two of them were present only meant one thing for Felicia and her group. We have backup. Her eyes widened with glee. She was previously worried about how many of her allies she would have to sacrifice to escape the clutches of Luciel and Brutus, but with two more otherworlders entering the scene, She was certain they could all make it out alive. In fact, it was even possible that they could complete the mission. "You three, come over here and Ada." "Silence. On your knees and let go of those heads," Clark yelled, his face expression nothing but utter disgust and righteous indignation. That response was not at all what Felicia was expecting. "Yeah?" Chapter 740 Demise of Deserters. "The 5 of you are under arrest, so you better not make a scene." Clark's loud voice caused even Felicia to shudder. He seemed genuinely mad at her, at all of them, for what they did. Something's wrong," she instantly thought to herself with wide-open eyes. Clark and Belle were supposed to be under her control. They were supposed to be on her side at all times, yet what was going on here? Did they somehow break out of my skill? But how? When? I don't understand. Where is Justin? He will say something to help us," Livia muttered as she began to cry. "Justin, please come in." "Silence." "Eek." Livia squeaked in response to Brutus' harsh command, now realizing just how terrible the current situation was. They were surrounded on all sides, and even though only Clark and Belle were guarding the gate, it was clear that they were leagues above Felicia and her group in terms of power and experience. This was truly the end of the line. "We surrender," Felicia had to blurt out, falling to her knees without a second of hesitation. She wasn't stupid enough to further escalate the issue, especially since she didn't have sufficient information. There were still so many things that confused her, and without understanding them, it would be foolish to act. "We are still otherworlders, and we have classmates on their side. As long as that's the case, they won't kill us or put us through much harm." She figured it was safer to enter into custody, obtain all the necessary information, and figure out where to go from there. One after the other, her allies began to kneel once again, following her lead. "I'm sorry, everyone," she thought bitterly to herself. "Even though you trusted me, I let you down." She thought she had everything under perfect control, but who would have thought that the Reaper group would play us like this? But why? This is too early for them to play their cards like this. Unless this wasn't their real goal from the start. Felicia took in a deep breath and decided not to think too much about abstracts. Firstly, she would have to understand the facts. "I just need to be patient, and no, I can't go to prison." This wasn't what you promised, Felicia." The loud cry of Livia pierced the air, causing everyone to shift all their attention to the girl who was still on her feet despite all her allies already kneeling. She had her hand raised in the air, displaying a ring worn on her finger. The crimson jewel affixed on it began to glow brightly, creating sparks of black and red around her. Whoosh! As the energy swelled, a small tempest began to surround her. "I won't be caught like this. I'll find Justin. We will have our happy ending. We will apprehend her." She heard Brutus' voice echo in the air. It was too late, though. In a flash of powerful energy, she vanished from her position, completely abandoning her stupefied allies. "The hell?" Lucielle whispered, watching the whole thing with slight shock on her face. Even though she had tried to interfere with the magic, something interfered with her interference, which prevented it from taking effect. That meant one of two things. Either that girl is much more skilled at magic than I am, or the one who designed that ring is. Lucielle highly doubted the former, which meant there was only one feasible option here. Who could have constructed that thing? Whoosh! Livia appeared in a storm of black and red energy, finding herself in a dense forest before realizing that she had vanished from the royal estate. Ha!Haa! I did it! I escaped. It was a good thing she was able to use the ring that Justin gave her before the start of the mission. He promised that it would bring her directly to him whenever she wanted. The gift was their little secret, so not even Felicia was aware of it. And now, you. Livia heard a voice emerge from behind her, and it caused her heart to skip nearly instantly. Her cheeks became bright red as she turned to witness the magnificent boy that stood a short distance from her. He had perfect dark brown hair, with a tall stature, and the perfect lean muscular body that would make any girl salivate. He was perfect. Justin! She cried out loud as she rushed towards him, her arms wide open. Tears floated away from her eyes as she finally reached and hugged him with as much ferocity as she could muster. Sobs escaped her lips as she found solace in his warmth. Don't go. Just stay right there. Just like that. She whimpered, hugging him tighter and tighter. Now that she had him, there seemed to be nowhere safer in the world. We can run somewhere far away. Just me and you. Away from all of this. We can start a new life together. As soon as she thought this, she smiled and lifted her head to gaze upon his amazing face. Right, Justy. Squelch. A sharp dagger pierced Livia from her lower jaw, rising to the top of her head, in one swift strike an easy kill. Confusion dulled the pain she felt as she felt her consciousness fade. J. Justin. Her blurry vision picked up the indifferent expression he had as he muttered words that he clearly didn't mean. I'm sorry. Livia's body fell lifelessly on the ground, blood spurting out of the open ends of the fatal wound she suffered, while Justin simply stood there and watched in silence. He said nothing as he watched her bleed out and die. My first human life. And yet, I feel nothing. Justin mumbled to himself, staring at his trembling hands. He could clearly understand the wrongness of his actions, but his body was perfectly numb to it, creating a severe case of cognitive dissonance. Still, it had to be done. Justin inhaled deeply and began to walk away from the corpse, not sparing it another look. This way, I've proven my loyalty to Sir Ader. Chapter 741 Demise of Deserters. She's dead. Felicia's eyes widened as she stared blankly at the world before her. She had a special class privilege that allowed her to monitor the status of everyone who was allied with her, especially their living or dead status. Only about a minute after Livia vanished from the group, Felicia discovered she was dead. How? No. Perhaps that wasn't the question she was supposed to be asking. Where did Livia get that ring? How was she able to defy me? Felicia did not leave room for any loose ends, and that applied double for her inner circle. All of them had been placed under the effects of her skill, so it was impossible for them to betray her or act without her best interests. Yet, did someone release her as well? Who? All of this is too confusing. Still, it was good riddance to see that the bitch was dead. If she had a teleportation item, she should have used it for the sake of everyone, or at least, for Felicia. Still, there was no use crying over spilt milk or wondering about the dead. Livia is gone, but I can still make use of the rest somehow. I just need to find out how to escape this place. A small smile formed on her face, completely oblivious of the intentions of the parties that still remained before her. We should interrogate them now just in case any of them have further tricks up their sleeve. Brutus advised, turning to Conrad, who was already nodding as he stared at the kneeling group intensely. You are correct. Lucielle. As soon as he gave the subtle command to Lucielle, she smiled and worked her magic. As Grand Mage, she was privy to tons of magic that most other mages didn't know existed, and could not perform even if they tried. Thanks to her supplementary skills in addition to her Grand Mage class, she was the most skilled at magic among the humans hands down. Let's see. She walked gently towards the four, who were eyeing her with slight trepidation and unease. They couldn't escape, and they couldn't plead their case. Their best bet was silence. The spell was cast on them without much difficulty. Perhaps this was because of Lucille's superior prowess compared to them, or due to her incredibly powerful equipment, or maybe the already weakened state of mind of the targets. Either way, they all fell under the spell. And no. This is bad. Felicia thought to herself the moment she felt the effects of the spell seep through her mind. It almost felt like she was high with everything getting blurry, yet sharper at the same time. Reality became distorted, and her body slowly swerved around before finally coming to a full halt thanks to her hypnotized state. Her mind struggled to break free from the spell, but it was too late. What are your names, and where are you from? Felicia, as well as her allies, heard the first question. Less than a second later, they told the correct answer. She didn't even need to think, or try to process the question. Her brain simply processed the question and spat out the required information, which was then delivered by her now loose and drooling lips. And no. I have to stop. I have to stop this. She cried internally. The only reason Felicia surrendered was because they were going to be imprisoned first. That would give her more than enough time to understand their situation. She even thought she would be able to ask some questions that would better place her on the right track. Not this. Never this. What are your class, skills, and levels? Once again, Felicia and her allies spat out all the information without hesitation or any form of resistance. If this kept up, it was clear what the next set of questions would be. Why did you do it? Why did you commit treason against the Royal Council? The moment Lucille's voice transferred the question, Felicia and her comrades already had their answers. To take over the United Human Alliance and rule it as the new leader. Felicia responded, and her words were followed by those of her allies. To become rich and comfortable. To get back at everyone who looked down on us. I just did it for Felicia. Nothing about their answers triggered anything yet. And did you really think you'd be able to accomplish things by yourself? Surely, you must have had some kind of plan. We had a plan. They jointly responded. What plan was that? Lucille pushed on, her eyes narrowing on them. Felicia begged internally at this point, praying that her lips would fail her. She didn't want to utter a single word for fear of what would happen. But it was too late. We partnered with the REA. Sploosh. The moment the group attempted to mention the names of the Reaper group, their partners in crime, the bodies exploded into bits and pieces. All, in a single instant, became fireworks of gore. Lucille was protected from the stain thanks to her automatic defenses, so none of the entrails and blood touched her. Sadly, they stained the pristine compound of the royal estate. Damn it! Lucille whispered underneath her breath. It seems they were placed under a non-disclosure curse before now. Any question that ties back to whoever placed the curse on them would have resulted in their demise. Lucille sighed, shaking her head in utter regret. This was the second blunder she was making on the same day, with the first being the escape of one of the deserters. Am I losing my touch? That's bad. Lucille thought to herself, though she didn't really believe it. Rather, she suspected there was just someone better pulling the strings from behind. But who? There was no way for her to find out, but that didn't mean she wasn't somehow determined to uncover the truth in her own way. Still, staring at the remains of what used to be 4 people, Lucielle couldn't help but feel both fascination and disgust for the malevolent figure hidden in the shows. What a mess. Chapter 742 Bloody Aftermath. In the end, all went according to Ader's grand scheme. The nobles, deserters, and dragons were all eliminated on the same day, each taken off the board in a rather spectacular, yet natural way. As long as the narrative that was spun remained effective, there would be no problem. The nobles were killed by the deserters, hence getting rid of them and the annoying authority that they wielded in the alliance. The economic and social impact their demise was going to cause made the royal council silently celebrate. The dissolution of their estate, the confiscation of their assets, as well as the massive creation of spaces in the south, would allow for a greater quality of life and less cost for those who lived there. There would also be less resistance to the governance of the royal council. As for the deserters, since they were wild cards running around with no allegiance to the betterment of humanity, they were more beneficial being dead. Since they were used as the scapegoats of the nobles, it only made sense that their deaths would be seen as deserving. Yes, the otherworlders who were their classmates would feel uncomfortable if they were to be executed, but if they died as a natural consequence of their actions, then their demise would be more justified. As for the dragons, their elimination was inevitable, but Ader simply had to make the most of their involvement with the capital. After understanding the purpose of their arrival, and the rules that they had to abide with, it was easy to orchestrate a scenario where the loss suffered by the dragons would be far greater than simply killing them. It would also serve to help him better understand certain things he was lacking in. Needless to say, it was a great success. And now, Ader thought to himself as he remained in the darkness, to prepare for the epilogue to this game. The last thing he hoped to achieve with his involvement was underway. I can't wait. Tremors. Freyja, the White Dragon Lord of the Forbidden Valley, was experiencing tremors throughout her body as she stood before a certain figure. She was in her domain, possessing all the advantage that any dragon would in their place of power, yet she felt helpless. The entity before her was a dragon like herself, but the gap in abilities between them was enough to make her body shake. She tried to speak, but words wouldn't come out. Her lips shook as her eyes were fixed down, unable to look at the being's face. The Emperor is not pleased. The voice of the aged man echoed into the air, causing her skin to nearly jump. The great old dragon lord usually had a calm, collected voice, and that was still present in the way he spoke to Freyja. But there was also something else attached to his tone. It was silent rage. Your subordinates broke the rules of the Emperor, Freyja. It is to my understanding that they were in the capital per your orders. I never told them to attack humans there. I warned them. Freyja wanted to scream out, but she didn't dare speak now, interrupting the great old dragon lord. You also had co-conspirators, Taturius, Protheus, and Vulcan. I already paid them a visit and exterminated them. Freyja had to swallow her shriek the moment she heard that. That's right, Freyja. They are all dead. All thanks to your indiscretion. As he said this, the great old dragon took a step closer to the shaking lord. She seemed to be nothing more than a frightened child in his presence. Who could blame her? If the co-conspirators were killed without mercy, what was to befall the one who brought them all together? Freyja had a single thought etched in her mind as the great old dragon drew even closer. What will my fate be? The Emperor has no need for subordinates who cannot follow simple orders. You are better off dead than alive for the benefit of the Empire, of course. At this point, Freyja fell to her knees and pressed her forehead against the ground, desperate to live. H, have mercy. P, please. Please have mercy. She already knew that the great old dragon lord was not interested in any explanation or excuse. The others must have also tried to plead their case, but he eliminated them anyway. Even pleading for her life was useless at this point. Yet, I will serve the emperor even more diligently than I have in the past. I swear it. Please give me another chance. Freyja already knew she couldn't win against the dragon before her. He was too ancient, almost as ancient as the dragon emperor himself. H, have mare. Before she realized it, her neck was being tightly held by the strong hand of the great old dragon, and he effortlessly raised her into the air. His grip was firm and inescapable, and his arm was steady and unmoving, almost like a statue. P, please. Me, mercy. Tears fell from Freyja's eyes as she was met with the unfeeling gaze of the old one. You do not need to beg for your life, Freyja. I never had any intention of killing you. Yet. Both relief and shock instantly appeared on her face. It wasn't like she wasn't happy that she was being spared, but she was confused as to the reason. You still remain a valuable educator in the academy, and the young ones have grown quite attached to you. They're at a pivotal moment in their education at the moment, as you are well aware, so taking you off the board right now would be unwise. This could have been the sentiment of an old man speaking. But Freyja gladly took it regardless. Thank you so much. I won't let you down. I promise. Still, I have to take something from you. Or it wouldn't be fair. The great old dragon lord stared deep into Freyja's moist blue eyes and smiled for the first time since he appeared before her. You have good eyes. It was slow and excruciating, the plucking out of just one of her crystal-like eyes. This was mercy, compared to what was meted out to her colleagues, but Freyja still felt every ounce of pain that it brought to her. She could not stop screaming in horror and agony. Urgh.